What would you do if your worst nightmare came to life right before your eyes? Imagine being a parent watching in horror as your disabled daughter is cruelly attacked, helpless and tied to her wheelchair by someone who is supposed to be a neighbor, a part of your community. This isn't a story about an isolated incident. It's one that reveals the shocking lengths an HOA Karen would go to make life unbearable for an innocent family. It all began when Karen, with a power trip fueled by bitterness, decided that my daughter, my family, would be her target. What followed was beyond anything we could have imagined, an act of violence so cruel it sent shockwaves through our quiet neighborhood. She was no longer just a part of our community. She was the villain in a story that would unfold in a way no one could predict. This is the heart-wrenching account of the day everything changed: the police, the emergency response, and the truth behind a mother's rage for justice. It's a story of survival, determination, and standing up for what's right, even when the world seems against you. The question is, will anyone step in before it's too late? Stay with me as we dive into the unimaginable, the terrifying moment when a helpless daughter becomes the victim of one of the most shocking attacks we've ever seen, and the fight to hold a Karen accountable begins. You won't believe what happened next. Our neighborhood was meant to be a peaceful place, a close-knit community where families looked out for each other. But for my daughter and me, it quickly became a battleground. My daughter, disabled and confined to a wheelchair, had always faced challenges. Life had never been easy for her, and she depended on the kindness and support of the people around her to get through each day. Unfortunately, that kindness was in short supply when it came to one particular neighbor, Karen, a woman with more power than she deserved in our homeowners association, HOA. At first, we didn't think much of Karen. She was just another member of the HOA, one of the many faces we saw at meetings or passed by during neighborhood walks. But it didn't take long for us to realize her true nature. Karen's obsession with control was evident from the start. She took every opportunity to impose her own rules, scrutinizing everyone's behavior in the neighborhood and making life difficult for anyone she saw as a threat to her authority. The tension between our family and Karen grew as she began targeting us with unreasonable demands. It started small complaints about our yard, noise levels, even the way we parked our car. But as time went on, her harassment escalated, and it was clear she had a personal vendetta against us. Karen saw us as an easy target. My daughter's disability made her vulnerable, and Karen reveled in her ability to push us around. We couldn't understand why she singled us out, but it quickly became apparent that her power trip within the HOA gave her the confidence to make our lives miserable. What started as a series of petty complaints soon turned into something far darker. And then it happened. One day, Karen crossed a line none of us could have anticipated. What had been mere harassment turned into violence. Tied to her wheelchair, my defenseless daughter became the victim of Karen's twisted sense of justice. This wasn't just a matter of a disgruntled neighbor. This was a woman who had become intoxicated with power, a woman who saw herself as untouchable. What followed would change our lives forever. As the days dragged on, it became harder to ignore the sense of dread that hung in the air. What began as small, petty grievances, a complaint about the garden being too overgrown or a noise issue at an inconvenient time, soon morphed into something far more sinister. The subtle bullying from Karen escalated with each passing week, and I could see it in my daughter's eyes. The fear was growing. Every time Karen's name came up, my daughter would tense up, her hands clutching the arms of her wheelchair as if bracing for the worst. The weight of this constant anxiety was taking a toll on her, both mentally and physically. At first, I tried to reassure her, but the threats kept coming, more frequently now, and they were no longer just directed at me. Karen had found new ways to involve my daughter, targeting her vulnerability with twisted, taunting remarks that she clearly found amusing. Karen wasn't just annoying us anymore. She was terrorizing us, feeding off the discomfort she was causing. And the more we tried to stand up for ourselves, the more Karen seemed to dig in her heels. It was clear Karen had grown emboldened. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that one day she would take things too far, but never imagining just how far she would go. My daughter, as fragile as she was, couldn't protect herself. She wasn't like other kids. She couldn't run away, couldn't fight back. I began to feel this overwhelming sense of helplessness. Every time I heard a knock on the door or saw Karen's car parked just a little too close to our driveway, my stomach would churn with anxiety. Then one afternoon, I received a message from a neighbor. Karen had made yet another complaint, this time about the position of my daughter's wheelchair on the porch. It was as though she had nothing better to do than to find new ways to create trouble. At first, I thought it was just another minor issue, but something about the tone of the message unsettled me. The neighbor warned that Karen had been talking about punishing us for our disregard of the rules. It was then that I realized how far gone she had become. Her obsession with control had consumed her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every passing car outside felt like a warning. I stayed up late, pacing back and forth, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios, but nothing could have prepared me for what would happen next. The following day, I went to check on my daughter in her room. She had been quieter than usual, her face pale. It wasn't just the usual tiredness from her disability. There was something different in her demeanor. She looked afraid. That's when it hit me. Karen had escalated from verbal harassment to something darker. My daughter, tied to her wheelchair, as if she were some kind of prisoner, had become a target of something much worse than bullying. Karen had shown up at our door unannounced, demanding to speak with me about yet another absurd complaint. But it wasn't the complaint that shook me. It was the way she acted. There was a coldness in her voice, a sense of finality in her actions. She barged in, ignoring any pleasantries or warnings, and without any explanation, began tying my daughter to the wheelchair. My daughter's protests were met with nothing more than a cruel smirk from Karen, as if this was all part of some twisted game. The helplessness I felt at that moment was suffocating. I had to stand there, paralyzed, as my daughter was restrained in a way that no human being should ever experience. The rage inside me built, but there was nothing I could do. Karen had control of the situation. I wanted to scream, to charge at her, but I was too scared for my daughter's safety. I could see the fear in my daughter's eyes that had always looked to me for protection, now filled with terror as Karen loomed over her, a person she once thought of as just another neighbor. The thought that this woman could do something this vile, with no consequences, was terrifying. What had started as harmless harassment had evolved into an act of cruelty. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. In that moment, I realized just how powerless I was and how much power Karen had gained. And that was the moment I knew I had to act. It was an ordinary afternoon, or so I thought. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over a quiet street. My daughter was in her room, as usual, quietly reading a book in her wheelchair. She had grown accustomed to the stillness, the solitude, and the occasional knock at the door that signaled the arrival of another complaint from Karen, our HOA neighbor. I had learned to brace myself for the minor frustrations. But that day would be different. I would soon learn that the worst was yet to come. I had just finished preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was late, but I assumed it was a delivery or maybe a neighbor with some innocuous request. However, when I opened the door, I was greeted by the last person I ever wanted to see, Karen. She was standing on the doorstep with her arms crossed, a scowl on her face, her eyes burning with anger. There was no warmth, no polite small talk, just pure, unfiltered rage. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up a piece of paper. It was yet another complaint, this time about something as trivial as the way my daughter's wheelchair had been positioned on the porch earlier that day. In Karen's world, no detail was too small to criticize, no matter how unreasonable it seemed. I tried to stay calm. "Karen, I'm really not in the mood for another complaint. We've been through this. My daughter needs her space to feel comfortable." She ignored me, pushing her way past me into the house, without so much as an invitation. "I'm not leaving until we settle this," she snapped, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. It was a moment I'll never forget. Karen stepped inside, and something felt different right away. This wasn't the same neighbor who used to come by with small complaints. There was something off about her, an edge in her demeanor that sent a chill through me. She walked in with a kind of certainty that made me uneasy, like she had complete control of the situation. And for the first time, I felt like she saw herself as someone who could control me, too. I stepped back instinctively, unsure of how to handle her presence. The last thing I wanted was for things to escalate. But Karen had changed. It was like the power she had gained over the HOA had gone to her head, inflating her sense of authority until she believed she could dictate every part of our lives, including mine. Before I could even process what was happening, she walked straight into the living room where my daughter was sitting, completely unaware of the tension building around her. My heart started racing. I realized Karen wasn't here for a conversation. She was here with a purpose, one that would turn our world upside down. "Mom, what's going on?" my daughter asked, sensing the unease in the air. But Karen didn't answer her. Instead, she looked at my daughter with a smirk, her lips curling in a way that made my stomach turn. "You think you're special because you're in that chair?" she said, her words sharp and full of venom. "You and your family think you're above the rules. Well, I'm here to make sure you learn your place." I rushed to my daughter's side, my heart pounding. "Karen, that's enough. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." But Karen didn't stop. She moved toward my daughter, eyes wild with fury, and reached down to fiddle with the straps on her wheelchair, tying her in place like she was some kind of prisoner. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The neighbor I once thought was just annoying had revealed herself to be something far worse, someone willing to harm an innocent, disabled child just to feel in control. "Stop," I screamed, but my voice seemed to have no effect. Karen didn't flinch. Her hands shook with rage, but it didn't matter. She was determined. "You don't deserve to be here. You don't belong in this neighborhood," she spat, her words cutting through me like a knife. My daughter began to panic, her breathing quickening as she struggled against the restraints. She couldn't move, couldn't fight back. Her hands trembled, and the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She was trapped, helpless, and I was powerless to stop it. Karen didn't just want to hurt her, she wanted to humiliate her. This wasn't just cruelty, it was calculated. It was deliberate. And I could feel the walls closing in as I realized I couldn't protect my own child. Just as Karen stepped back, clearly satisfied with what she'd done, I heard my daughter's voice, weak but desperate. "Mom, please help me." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about rules or authority anymore. This was violence. Real, undeniable violence. I rushed to my daughter, trying to untie the straps, but Karen wasn't finished. She grabbed my arm and yanked me away with a strength I hadn't expected. "Stay out of this," she hissed, her face inches from mine, filled with a dark determination. At that moment, I knew things had gone too far. I needed help, police, neighbors, anyone. But I was too late. The damage was already done. What I didn't know then was that the arrival of the police would only be the beginning of a much bigger fight. One that would expose Karen for the monster she'd become and force the entire community to confront the truth about her reign of terror. Time seemed to slow down as my heart pounded. My mind raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. Karen stood there, watching us with a twisted, satisfied grin. She had succeeded in tying my daughter down, leaving her completely vulnerable, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. I couldn't help but feel powerless. Karen's smirk only grew as she saw the fear in my eyes, savoring the control she had over both of us. "You think you're going to stop me?" she sneered. "This is how things are going to be from now on. You'll learn to obey me, or you'll regret it." I couldn't stand it anymore. My daughter's terrified eyes, wide with fear and desperation, tore at my heart. She was pleading with me silently, asking for help. I could feel her panic rising as she tried to move, but her body betrayed her. She was trapped, not just by the restraints, but by her own limitations. I fought back the tears, forcing myself to stay strong for her, even though I was shaking inside. I needed to find a way to protect her. Somehow. As Karen continued to spew her cruel words, I noticed something. My daughter was trying to reach for something. Her hand moved slightly, and I realized what she was going for. Her phone. It wasn't much, but it was hope. She was trying to call for help. Karen saw it too, and she wasn't going to let it happen. She grabbed my daughter's hand and yanked it away from the phone with a laugh that made my skin crawl. "Not so fast, sweetheart," she sneered. I froze for a moment, my mind racing. Was it too late? Had Karen taken away our only chance? But I could see it in my daughter's eyes. She wasn't giving up. Neither was I. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged at Karen, trying to break free from her grip. "Let go of her," I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. But Karen was stronger than I expected. She shoved me aside, knocking the wind out of me and sending me sprawling to the floor. For a moment, the room spun, and I couldn't breathe. But even through the haze of pain, I could still see my daughter's face, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let this woman break us. Summoning every ounce of strength I had left, I pushed myself up and rushed to my daughter's side. Karen was still trying to keep me away, but this time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my daughter's arm and pulled her toward me. "We're getting out of here," I whispered, trying to reassure her, even though I wasn't sure if I could keep that promise. But Karen wasn't done. "You think you can just walk away?" she snarled. "I'm not done with you yet." My blood ran cold. I could hear the sirens in the distance, but I knew they wouldn't arrive in time. The seconds stretched on, and the fear in my chest tightened. We needed to escape, now, or there would be no one to save us. Then, just as Karen was about to overpower me again, my daughter did something unexpected. With the last of her strength, she reached up and grabbed the phone. Her hand shook, but somehow, she managed to pull it closer to her chest. I didn't know how she did it, but in that moment, I saw a small glimmer of resistance buried deep inside her. "Call them," she whispered, her voice barely audible but full of determination. She had done it. She had gotten the phone. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed it from her, dialed 911, and pressed it to my ear. "Please help us," I gasped as the operator answered. "We're being attacked. My daughter is tied up, and the woman who did it is still here. Please hurry." The operator responded quickly, asking for our location and assuring me help was on the way. But Karen, realizing what had just happened, turned on me in a fit of rage. "You think they'll save you?" she spat, her hands shaking with fury. "You're wasting your time." But I didn't care. The call was our lifeline, and I held on to it with everything I had. The sirens grew louder, signaling the police were close. Karen tightened her grip on my daughter, pulling her back into the wheelchair. We had to hold on just a little longer. The police arrived, bursting through the door and pulling Karen away. They placed her under arrest before she could do any more damage. As soon as the tension lifted, I rushed to my daughter's side, cradling her in my arms. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "You're safe now. You're safe now." We had made it out. And while the road to justice would be long, that moment was the first step toward healing.